Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be an overview and my impressions, my experiences summed up in one video of these four mice. I have the Vaxee NP-01S wireless. I have the Lamzu Atlantis 4K, the Razer Cobra Pro, and the Gitoper G2. All of these mice are fairly new on the market. I don't have enough time, unfortunately, to get all of these in an individual review, but I think this overview of my impressions and my opinions and how I feel on these mice is going to be enough to get you guys through. In terms of the Vaxee NP-01S, which I will be starting with, I actually do love a lot of things about this mouse, but unfortunately the size and the feel of the mouse in my sized hands, it just doesn't quite work for me. I can't find a good enough grip with the mouse to make this a viable option for me, especially when I already own the Vaxee XE wireless, which also has the competitive mode firmware, feels extremely good performance-wise, and is, again, a better shape for me. Now, the thing I like about the mouse is the coating. It actually does feel quite good. It stays dry. The switch implementation feels fairly good, but the plastic over mouse 1 and mouse 2 has a little bit of side flex. I actually do feel it in game sometimes on this particular mouse, and the side buttons do have a little bit of post travel, particularly towards the bottom of the button and the far top side of the button. If you hit it right in the middle, there's really not a lot of post travel at all, nothing of concern. I don't have any switch grinding. I just have, again, play on mouse 1 and mouse 2. Scroll wheel feels good, what you expect from Vaxee. The skates are the default Vaxee skates, which are just okay. And then you have the buttons on the bottom side of the mouse, which I love. Not having to go into software for debounce 842, your hertz pulling rate 1,500, 125, and your DPI. All the buttons work flawlessly. Again, because of the side flare out on the bottom left side, because my hands are a bit larger, it hits me right where the meat part of my portion of my thumb kind of lands. Because of that, it kind of forces my ring finger and pinky finger off the mouse right where it kind of curves over. And because of that, I kind of just have a very awkward grip, one that just doesn't feel good for me. Because of that, I'm not going to be continuing to use the mouse. Overall performance feels great. The thing is built like an absolute tank. Best build quality out of anything on the table. Again, separate and apart from mouse 1 and mouse 2, having a little bit of side play. Overall, a lot of things to like about it. Build quality seems good. Overall performance feels great. It is a fairly lightweight mouse at, I believe, 68 grams. The weight feels a little bit towards the back, but overall pretty well weight balanced. I think if somebody has smaller hands, they would really, really enjoy this mouse, but not one that me personally I can use, one that I personally play worse on compared to the Vaxee XE. Again, that's me. That's my hand size, so keep that in mind. The next mouse is the Lamzu Atlantis 4K. You guys have already seen my Lamzu Atlantis review. It is not going to be any different at all. The mouse does feel a little bit different in terms of the coating. Overall, I think it does have probably the best coating out of anything on the table. It just feels really dry. It feels chalky. Never once do I feel muddy on this mouse. Easily the best buttons in terms of mouse 1 and mouse 2 out of anything on the table. The blue shell pink dot implementation on mouse 1 and mouse 2 feel really good. Minimal side play on mouse 1 and mouse 2, and nothing that I was able to feel in game, nothing that I accidentally would shift over one way or the other like I did on the NP-01S. Scroll wheel feels great. Mouse 3 is spammable, and mouse 4 and mouse 5 just have minimal pre-travel, minimal post-travel. Overall, a really nice feeling mouse with a little bit more post-travel as well towards the bottom portion. It kind of makes the switch stick out diagonally. As long as you're hitting it in the middle of the switch, again, the pre- and post-travel are actually pretty negligible. The skates that come with the Lamzu Atlantis are arguably the best out of all of the mice on the table. I like the Lamzu Atlantis design. I always have. And overall 4K implementation, I did have a little bit of issue on my Intel CPU. I recently swapped over to an AM5 socket with a 7950 X3D so that I could have a little bit of a quicker time processing these videos and rendering these videos in 4K 60. And I did not have any issues at all on my AMD CPU. It feels buttery, feels smooth. Does that increase my performance? No, it does not. I don't feel like I am playing any better or playing any worse. I feel like I am comparable to how I play on 1K, but it does offer a little bit of a bit more of a buttery experience, if that makes sense. But again, if I swapped that same mouse to 1000 hertz polling rate, I would be fragging out just as much as I do on 4K. So a nice option and a nice thing to have. And I think soon we'll probably see the standard changing to 4K, especially with these new sensors and all of these companies now almost offering 4K as an option coming out of China. So it's nice to have the option, and the mouse is not that expensive at all for that implementation. So I like to see it. It's a great performing mouse. You guys can see how I feel about the shape compared to other similar things on the market in my original wireless Atlantis 4K review. But overall, 4K implementation, again, feels pretty buttery smooth. Now, getting to the Razer Cobra Pro, especially us as a community, I can absolutely understand why there is frustration. Nobody had really intended or asked for a lot of these additions to the coveted Razer Viper Mini. And I think that the biggest thing is when the Signature Edition came out at such a hefty price with limited availability, I think people were almost promised that there would be a cheaper, more available, solid performance pro gaming option with a Viper Mini size and shape. This gets pretty damn close to the Viper Mini, but again, nobody had really asked for the RGB. And I think just as a community, we're kind of going away from RGB additions on mice to save in weight. And then it does have the magnetic charging as well, which, again, no one really asked for. They added that on the Basilisk V3. I don't think that people were kind of jumping up and down about that as an option. And at the price point, I kind of wish that it would come with the 4K dongle, or at least come with that wireless dongle like the Basilisk V3 Pro had. Overall, though, I liked the rubber grips on the Viper Ultimate. I liked the rubber grips on the Razer Cobra Pro. The build quality is arguably the best out of everything on the table, especially the switches, as well as just the overall structural integrity of the mouse. The thing is built like a brick. Now, because the mouse is so small, that weight is definitely more noticeable in the inside of the mouse. Like, you feel that weight with all of those extra add-ons. But does that affect my performance? It doesn't. I play just as good on this mouse at its current weight than if it was 20 grams less. I think that it's just more comfortable being lightweight. It's just nicer to have as an option, at least, without the RGB. And they did make a statement that there's just no plan right now to come out with that option. So I think just where the market is right now, it would have made more sense to forego the RGB, the wireless magnetic charging. And I mean, you could have left the side grips on for sure without adding too much weight, but it would have been nice to see this in a little bit more of a lighter weight package. I've never really liked the Viper Mini shape, so it's just not something that I really care about too much. I don't really care too much about weight, so I'm not necessarily going to shit on the mouse just because it is a little bit on the heavier side for this size, but I would point out that you definitely feel that weight whipping around when you are moving this thing around. Again, the switches feel great. Overall build quality feels great. The side buttons are a little bit different than what we're used to now on the Viper V2 and the Razer Death Adder V3. They almost feel and sound a little bit muted, but I think they feel okay and they feel good in game. Arguably the best side buttons out of all these options on the table. Scroll wheel feels great. I like the textured rubber on the scroll wheel. And overall, like, the RGB looks cool when you're in a dark room and you're playing. Again, just not something that people really care about. And when you are fragging out, I mean, your hand is just totally covering the RGB. So it's just one of those options that's kind of pointless at this point. The skates out of the box arguably are pretty damn good. There could be a fair argument whether or not the Lamzu has better skates or the Razer Cobra Pro. I personally like the skates on the Razer Cobra Pro. And overall, I would say that my performance on the mouse was actually really good. I was fragging out all day on the Cobra Pro and all day or all night last night. So again, my performance is good. I'm not really offended. Somebody who's offended by heavier mice. You guys know I like the EC3, EC1, EC2, the Vaxee mice. So overall, it's just not something that's going to cause me to shit on the mouse. I think that it does feel pretty good in terms of performance. The only other thing I would point out about the mouse, like the aesthetic I really wish that with the offset of the rubber on the sides, I could have done without this glossy little M on the top shell of the mouse. Honestly, I wish it was just one full coating that didn't have that kind of separation on the top with that glossy look. I don't really like it. I think it just would have looked a lot better with the rubber side grips and one solid texture here on the top of the mouse. Now, in terms of the Gitoper G2, this is a $33.95 lightweight at 57 grams coming out of China. This mouse arrived to me with a disconnected battery. I took this out of the box, and it was kind of just rattling around. I was shaking the mouse, and it sounded like a maraca. I had to take the skates off, open the mouse, and reinstall the battery. And I also had to, of course, then put on my own new skates instead of just having the default skates. Overall, the build quality is definitely the worst out of everything on the table. It just feels cheap. It doesn't feel like as solid, for instance, as the Lamzu Atlantis 4K. Overall, the coating actually isn't that bad. I think the side buttons are horrendous. They're long, they're narrow, but overall, other than the side buttons, I don't have a lot of side play on mouse 1 and mouse 2. It is using blue shell pink dots. The switch implementation actually does feel pretty good, and the weight and weight balance actually do feel good. I think the shape is a little bit uninspiring. It almost feels like an old IntelliMouse or a longer S2 with a bit more of side flares. I think that if you're somebody who is interested in the mouse, I would say that the performance, when I got everything installed and set up, actually did feel good in game. The weight balance for its size feel good. I just have to question the quality checks over at Gitoper. The fact that it arrived to me in that condition is a little bit questionable. Again, hate the side buttons. And then the DPI button, when I was pushing it in and changing the steps, it actually gets stuck sometimes. So that's just another thing I would point out with the build quality. Overall, again, I think a pretty uninspiring shape, one that's very safe. And I think for that reason, it actually does perform well. But overall, just not something that I can recommend with the fact that it arrived to me in that condition. So that is going to be it for this one, guys. Again, I wish I had more time over this weekend and moving into this next week to do individual reviews. I just don't. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer any of your questions. That's it for this one, guys. Have a happy 4th of July, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.